Good evening. Welcome to Fabled 42, where we foster community through friendship, gaming, and chaos. COVID 19 has presented some unexpected challenges for businesses across a wide range of industries, and challenges for families and individuals as well. Many people turn to their communities for support in trying times, but the virus has made that very difficult. Tonight's panel will explore how the gaming community is weathering the storm, and how game stores and game adjacent organizations are helping to keep people connected. With us tonight, we have Daniel Fox from Andrews McMeel Universal, Matt from Wounded Warrior Project, Phil Kilgore from Tabletop Game and Hobby, my personal FLGS, right here in Kansas City, and my name is Laura Crossan, and I'm just the moderator for this evening. All right, gentlemen, good evening. It's good to have everybody here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Of course. I think the first thing I'd like to do is to ask sort of the big burning question, which is what is the number one thing that game stores can do to stay connected with their customers during something like the COVID epidemic? And then I'll extend that same question to the rest of you and have you share how you think is that what the best thing is that you can do as well. So Phil, can you take just a moment and speak to how you feel about that?
Sure. Prior to COVID, we had a decent Facebook presence and a few other channels we were using for communication. But more than anything, we've doubled down on or tripled down on all those things. As far as for staying connected with our local community, the most important thing I think that we've done is just simply to get our doors back open to a small degree, and quite frankly, most of the conversations that take place on our sidewalk, standing outside of the store. We rolled out. We have a Discord channel now. We have set up an awful lot of pieces for folks to talk to each other within the community. But essentially, so much of our hobbies are face to face. Having any place for folks to go where they can safely social distance or mask up and things along those lines, that has made a huge difference for us. Every time I go into work, we see a nice collection of people standing around outside having that long hobby conversation, but at least they're getting a chance to see each other and get a little bit of interaction. So.
Oh, nice. Okay. And so, Daniel, I know that working in the publishing industry, your whole idea is about communicating with people, but I think traditionally on a more one-on-one level. So how have you guys dealt with this? I know that you're also a game publisher. So can you talk a little bit about that and how you stay connected?
Yeah, so thanks for asking the question. It's a really good one. I think a lot of RPG publishers are kind of asking themselves the same question, whereas most games have been kind of positioned for the in-person experience at the game store. I think we're certainly seeing a change in the demography in the way they're using virtual tabletops like Oracle Board, Roll20, Fantasy Grounds. So from a publisher perspective, I mean, it's really about reinvesting into digital communication. So as an example, like right now, GenCon's about to kick off at tomorrow, right? It's Wednesday now, so kick off tomorrow. And we would traditionally be in a booth with organized play set up through GenCon, set up events and things like that. So we actually transitioned all of our events to online. Most of our younger community, kind of beneath the ages of 35, are mostly on Discord and using Roll20. So as opposed to setting up a number of in-person events, which obviously we can't do because GenCon's canceled, we have done all online events. We're pretty proud to announce that we've got like 28 events currently running over the next several days. And the good thing is we're running it from Discord, so we can kind of consolidate our community to one place to talk and really understand how to interconnect with other people. The things that you would normally do at your local gaming store, now people can kind of connect digitally in that case. Unfortunately, and I think a lot of publishers are kind of ahead of the curve. We're already positioned to be set up for both online and offline gaming. I think we're lucky in that with Andrews McMeel's kind of experience in the industry and just RPGs in general, we when these things started happening back in December, January in China, we started repositioning how we're going to handle events, how we're going to connect with customers, and really more so than anything else, like how we sell books at the end of the day. That's top of mind for any publisher, but really it's been about digital outreach through Twitch, through paid influencer sponsorships, through use of Discord, so higher touch relationships on social media like Twitch and Facebook, and really gearing those messages toward connecting online as opposed to putting our efforts to do stuff in stores. And unfortunate, it's unfortunate in that sense because, like Tabletop Games and Hobby is my favorite local gaming store, and a lot of our focus has been on an organic growth through that. But reinvesting in digital outreach has been key in us kind of surviving the wake of COVID.
That is some great input, and I think a really cool perspective. So Matt, I also want to turn to you because I know that you are heavily invested always in community and building community and maintaining community for people who had a community, and then when during or post service, being sure that you can keep in touch with people. So what have you found are some of the challenges?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that we're worried about at Wounded Warrior Project was most of Wounded Warrior Project's events are actually in person. We generally say there's about 19 events going on across the country at different Wounded Warrior Project offices or locations at any given day. And so we had to really transition all of our programs and services to a virtual setting. And so one of the interesting, or I guess exciting opportunities was moving into the live streaming and gaming space. So to stay connected with our warriors, we created a Discord server. We've set up virtual game nights, and we have a Dungeons and Dragons night where players can come together and use Roll20 and D&D Beyond and tools like that to play virtual Dungeons and Dragons together. So it's really just about trying to create an online community where veterans can stay connected during COVID and making sure that they feel still connected to Wounded Warrior Project and they don't feel like they're alone.
Oh, very cool. Okay, so what I want to do for now is we've kind of gotten through that first question. I want to remind the audience members who are watching that not only is this a conversation with questions that we have planned, but if you have anything that you'd like to ask any or all of our panel members, we would love to hear from you. So please go ahead and let us know, and we will get your questions added to the list. But going down next, I think I'm going to just throw this out to anybody who wants to start, and then I'd like to have a kind of a roving conversation. What has been the biggest concern that members of your community have brought to you in wake specifically of COVID-19, but of the concern for trying to stay connected remotely? So what's the biggest thing that you've heard from your actual constituents?
So on the, you want to start, if you don't mind? Is that okay?
No, absolutely. That's what I said. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that for publishers, specific to Andrew McNeil, and to set this up, I mean, our RPG division is about a year old, so it's still very fresh and new. And we started a lot of our online efforts very early in the process. Some of the concerns that I think that some of the players just in general have is like, will products be releasing on time? COVID has not just impacted the interactivity we have face to face, but it's also impacted production overseas. A lot of publishers, including Andrew McNeil, works with a lot of trusted partners out of China to produce all of our beautiful books, ranging from calendars and poetry and illustrated fiction and RPGs. So obviously, tariffs was a concern earlier on, and then of course, once COVID hit, I think it kind of put customers in a sense of like, hey, are we going to get this RPG still? Is it still coming out on time? And honestly, I think a lot of publishers were struggling with that. We're lucky that we've got really good relationships and we haven't seen any change in our product flow. It certainly hasn't pushed out any of our production cycles for RPGs either. But not all publishers are that lucky. I mean, there are the big two, Paizo and Dungeons and Dragons, have certainly felt some of that impact. Smaller and mid-sized publishers certainly have, without a doubt, because it's impacting production cycles. I mean, obviously, people not having a job and not being able to like pay bills and pay their artists, pay their writers can become a challenge. But we've been strongly positioned from that perspective. I think really, if I was to think about the thing that's in front of us, like the next step, which is, we're piloting an online organized play program right now, but we want to do that in person. Like, how do we cope with that in the wake of COVID? How do we have the face-to-face interactivity? Because that sort of organic growth, that community outreach that starts, with one game master at a game store teaching 4 to 6 players how to play a new game is so incredibly important for the growth of RPG, not just at conventions and not just online, but perhaps even more importantly, like where that kind of, where in my mind, where that kind of starts is with the game store.
Yeah, I think I can touch on content creation. It's an interesting world that we've been in, and coincidentally and luckily, like Fabled 42, I moved. So me moving away from my home table that we were playing in San Francisco started us with this journey of remote gameplay, trying to figure that out, trying legitimately every option in the world, and then we found Vorpal, and then we fell in love because Vorpal board is literally everything that you need, especially for tabletop, gaming online. But then you have other groups like the monster of Critical Role, They were quiet. They didn't do any streams for 3 months because of COVID. They wanted to make sure that they were all safe. They wanted to make sure their crews were safe. And now they came back and they have different tables and everybody's like 6 feet apart, and it's different and it feels different. Everyone has their own table, but you're still part of the same table. But not everybody can do that, right? So like a lot of other streams have definitely suffered because they don't have the capabilities. They don't want to risk anyone getting sick or anything like that. So they're all now scrambling to try to do remote stuff. Same thing with like GenCon. I think GaryCon was the first one on the docket where I was going to GaryCon. A lot of people were going to GaryCon and they weren't sure. Then they canceled. But then they scrambled to try to do something remote, and everyone's kind of followed suit. Some people waited a little longer than they should have, but they followed suit. So now you have virtual GaryCon, virtual Founders and Legends. Then you have virtual GenCon, which starts tomorrow. And it's been an interesting transition, I think. Everyone trying to just react, because a lot of people, and we've heard this from our community, everyone's at home. A lot of people are out of work, or they're just kind of down on their luck. What do people turn to? They turn to Netflix, or they turn to Twitch. And people are relying on our storytelling and our character development and our interaction with the community to just help them get through this hard time. And it's one of those things that I didn't even think about that from that perspective initially anyway. And now I just want to keep doing it. I want to do more now. Like, we want to do more to try to help more people just, laugh for a couple hours, on a Wednesday, or, freak out because they're fighting a monster that's too big. That's later tonight. But yeah, it's an interesting transition. It really is. And it's been fun, and we've been blessed enough to have a community that has supported us in all these transitions, and we got ahead of the curve with the remote stuff just because I moved. And definitely thinking that I'm glad that we're there. We started that a year ago, opposed to trying to figure it out now, which was there were a lot of learning curves with that.
Phil, Matt, do you guys have? Oh, awesome! Yeah.
Yeah, I would say from my standpoint, I would echo a lot of what Daniel said. Technology can be your friend, but it can also be your foe. And we took a lot of people that were very new to Dungeons and Dragons, and now we're trying to teach them the game through an online setting, which can be very difficult. I mean, that is definitely a game best learned in person, in a close-knit environment. So, technology was a little bit of a challenge. We did a lot of, most of our warriors were even new to Discord. They had never been on Discord. They had never used it. So we spent a lot of time doing Discord 101s and really trying to teach our warriors how to use the technology platforms that we were on. We held a lot of session zeros with teaching them about how to create your character on D&D Beyond, how to navigate Roll20, and how to play through Roll20. So it was just a matter of really trying to break down some of those communications and some of those technologies and explain them to our warriors and get them familiar with it so that they could enjoy virtual content.
Nice. So, Phil, what have you heard from your tabletop customers in terms of what they're most worried about in terms of community and so forth during the pandemic?
Well, the struggles that everybody here has already going through is the same ones that everyone else is that has had the opportunity to have strong face-to-face games. So, and again, I think the kind of moving over towards Discord has been the things that they're following through with. What we're really beginning to see where we are now is we are starting to see groups gather in smaller, small gatherings at their home as opposed to large convention scenes, things like that. So, for us, one of the biggest weight of pressure that we had was parents that had their children at home to entertain them. That has been a huge piece for us, that we've had a lot of outreach material and stuff to try to show parents, hey, look, you can run, D&D for your kids. Here's how you do it. And more than anything, we have just been trying to refer folks to areas that they can find the information that they need. As far as for communication with our audience, Laura, you actually helped me out a great deal with that, setting up our Discord channel, things along those lines. But from our end, we use Facebook as a powerful tool. Not that I'm particularly in favor of it, but we at least can use that as as a piece to be able to get the information out to our audience. That's probably the most important thing. Again, this is for somebody that grew up. I started playing D&D in the '70s. This, transiting over to a video feed for this has been difficult. Although we managed to get through it.
I think
Um,
I always wonder if we're going to see this like micro convention or pop-up convention thing become something. Because I mean, obviously, Phil, you've been playing much longer than many of us. Like conventions in the '80s were smaller, and now they're huge, and they're mostly retail. They're like mostly not really consumer; they're B2B.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you think there'll be a return to that?
I have a feeling we're going to see most of the major organizations out there take a huge hit from this, and I really see a lot more smaller community activity post this environment. I really think your FLGS, providing they can weather the storm, I think will thrive on the other side of this. But I think we're going to see a lot more smaller community style of things because, the idea of going out and circulating with 500 people in my local community is very different than going across the country and circulating with 80,000.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of these things, and going back to what the convention scene looked like you said, Daniel, back in the '80s, where it's going to be your local community center rather than a football field or a huge convention center.
I think that's an interesting point. I'm going to be attending a virtual game developers conference next week, so we'll kind of just see how that goes. As one of the larger conventions, now they're moving virtually, so I think it's interesting, but I think, Phil, you're right. I think people are going to move to kind of those smaller settings to connect.
Yeah, I think actually we're going to end up seeing the quality of these small shows skyrocket. Yeah. I think that they're going to have a capped number of membership. I think those kind of bespoke game conventions may be a thing going forward. So.
Yeah, I'm sure Lucas Oil Stadium right now is empty and lonely.
Exactly.
I'm missing the drive to GenCon right now. I got a little bit of a pain in my stomach this morning. I'm like, I'm not driving to GenCon today. This sucks. Yeah. I miss everybody.
So I know that we're going to lose Matt at 7:00. He has another obligation, but was good enough to come to this point. So I want to ask a couple of Matt questions before he leaves. First of all, Matt, what is the most important thing that you want game stores, game makers, community organizations, groups like Chris's, like Fabled 42? What's the most important thing that you want them to know in terms of helping out organizations like yours?
Most definitely. So one of the things that we found out at the very beginning of COVID was that our population, our warriors, are huge gamers, including tabletop and Dungeons and Dragons. So that's just one of the things that I think everybody can keep in mind is if you're interested in engaging veterans in those platforms, they're definitely out there, and they really enjoy that being connected to a group feeling. One of the big things that we worried about at Wounded Warrior Project was our warriors isolating, and especially when you add in a pandemic, there's a chance that they can be isolated even more. So just finding ways to connect veterans to groups. Veterans naturally love usually being in a group. We're all in the military at some point, and we all are connected to larger groups. So it's just been really cool for us to kind of see how our veterans are taking to Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletops. I mean, they love it. And there are people that probably have said, I didn't know anything about D&D, nor did I think I would like D&D. And now they can't wait for the next session of D&D to happen. They're like, oh, can't we play twice a week? Or, It's been great to see, our warriors are really enjoying playing tabletops and playing Dungeons and Dragons. And it's just been great to see.
And if people wanted to get more information about your organization and how you might be able to work with them in their areas, how exactly would they do that, Matt?
For sure. So you can go to woundedwarriorproject.org. If you wanted to learn more about Wounded Warrior Project, you can go there. If you are looking to get connected, I can definitely shoot over our Discord information to you, and you can share it with the viewers. Unless, Chris, are you in Twitch?
I am. I can do that right now.
Excellent. Chris will drop a link to our Discord page. If you are a supporter of veterans or a supporter of Wounded Warrior Project or just want to see kind of what we're up to, feel free to join our Discord, and you can definitely take a look at what we're up to.
Awesome. Okay, and then real quick before you go, for the rest of you guys, for Phil, for Chris, for Daniel, what is it is there anything that you guys would like to specifically support, or that you need from organizations like Wounded Warrior in terms of information, or what can he do for you guys?
Yeah, I think from the perspective of a publisher, I think we're always looking for new ways for outreach. Obviously, Dungeons and Dragons is the lingua franca of all tabletop games. But as any game store owner can certainly tell you and anybody else, like there's more games than D&D. I think that finding ways we can bring new games to Warriors and other new tabletop gamers who are coming in through the vector of D&D is always of interest to publishers. I mean, finding ways we can work together through sponsorship, through charitable donations, whatever that may look like. That's what publishers look for. It's what we'd love to work with Wounded Warrior on. I was talking to Matt before the stream about that. So it's a super germane, but I think, for publishers, really finding ways to work with organizations who are focusing on using games as a form as being therapeutic, as a way to continue getting together and hanging out and telling cool stories and doing things here and cooperating and having fun. Like those things are really super intriguing and we would love to work with the Wounded Warrior Project on something like that.
Most definitely. D&D tends to be the way in, and then you get to explore the rest of the tabletop world. And I would even include card games in that as well, like Magic the Gathering. So I definitely think our Warriors would be super interested in learning that there is a much larger world out there than just Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Different kinds of games facilitate different kinds of engagement, and the more that you guys take a look around, the more I have a feeling that you're going to find different homes for different folks. So
definitely, you'll have to let me know if there's any military tabletop sims that they might enjoy.
Many.
Yeah.
Is that a facetious question? Are you messing with us, or?
I know I was told there's many, and I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe we can narrow that down a bit.
Yeah, that's
awesome. No, go ahead. Oh, I thought there was somebody who wanted to say something. I didn't want to step on that. And Lord knows I love the sound of my own voice, but I don't want to get in the way of you guys talking. So, all right. So Phil, let's go back to you for a second. For Tabletop, since you have been a fixture of the nerd community here in Kansas City for more than a quarter of a century now, can you talk a little bit about the community that you've helped to build here in KC?
Yeah. One of the things which I don't know if necessarily was an innovation, but it was kind of one of the best choices that we made when we started was, we have a discrete space for gaming, a discrete space for the store to operate in. And the communities and stuff that we've fostered over the years, we would generally, people from every walk of life like to geek out about whether it's a board game, role-playing game, toy soldier war game, figure painting, things along those lines. And just simply over the years, as we would go in, run demonstration games and help to bring people together, very much, Matt, we have a strong community of veterans, both active and retired military that we have on a regular basis, helping those folks all kind of find each other and then providing them with a no cost area to be able to gather every single week has always been a huge thing. So obviously in COVID, my game room is absolutely, empty right now. We use it for other things. It won't always be that way. We know that that's going to change on the other side. But one of the things that we've tried to make sure is to keep our communities talking with each other. That's where we have the Discord channels. We have, and I unfortunately, I employ young people much smarter than I to actually do most of this, but we have many communication channels to keep those people talking to each other going through this environment. For us, that's probably the most grieving thing from the COVID environment is the fact that, my nerds are not flocking anymore. When our 80 member board game club doesn't meet every week, it hurts, but I do know they're still talking. I know that they're going to come back. It's been a great blessing for us to be able to facilitate that. And, the biggest thing that I think we're going to leave as a legacy on this is, going more than, we just had our 26th anniversary. Ours has become very much a generational activity for families. And seeing that continuing to go on, I think is going to be a really good thing.
Yeah, I just want to add there in terms of the families thing. It for me as a customer, it's been great to watch that. I don't have any children, but I have watched kids grow up in tabletop, even in just the 20 odd years that I've been back here in Kansas City. And in fact, isn't your manager a former child who used to hang out in your game room and
yes.
raised by a beholder that hangs in your store?
Yes, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, my manager now, actually, his mom was dumping him off in the minivan when he was in high school, and my wife and I weren't blessed with kids that biologically we were challenged. So at the end of the day, we're not going to live forever, and having somebody that is going to be a steward for this operation, because it's gone generational, is critical for me. So Walter's come on board, and when we pass, we're just going to leave him the company so he can carry on with those things, and to see that take place. We have one family, which unfortunately due to COVID, we couldn't do it. We have 4 generations of family. When their little girl was going to turn 4, I was giving her her first game. We were going to do a photo shoot for that, but that'll have to wait a little bit. Maybe she'll get a Christmas present from me. We'll bring everybody in.
Aw. So, bye, Matt. Everybody's bye,
Matt.
See ya. Thank you so much for having me.
So Chris, I want to ask you a question here. I know that you're trying to run the chat channel and everything, but you're an important part of this group. So what do you think that content creators like Fabled 42 bring to the community building table, and how do you see yourself fitting in with the rest of the panelists?
That's an interesting question as I get this all squared away.
I know. I managed to choose right when you were doing something.
Right?
I didn't mean to do that.
It's always you're at a restaurant and you have something in your mouth and like, how was your meal?
Yeah.
You're like, really? No, I think we have a large responsibility as content creators. Like controversial, but when you look at like athletes, they don't realize that they are role models for people who want to become athletes. And they don't even have that right now. And everyone is going to games and they're watching streams. Everybody wants to be Matt Mercer or whatever. Matt Mercer got me back into D&D after not playing D&D for 20 years and pretty much saved my life creatively. Like, I was ready to give up. And then I found 5th edition. I was like, where has this been? And everyone's like, it's huge. I'm like, what are you talking about? It was this whole thing, right? But I think content creators, we all have a responsibility, like to continue to. Every show is different. There are some people that show that are more just about the rules and the games and mechanics, and that's fine. And we were talking about the mech game or something crazy earlier, and I'm like, that sounds like it hurts. My ears are bleeding right now. But like, I'm much more on the side of like bending rules. I don't use grids because like, if it's really 35 feet, but 30 feet gets you there and it's better for the story, you get there, right? So like I can finagle things for story, and we're very role play heavy, we're very character driven. I do a bunch of crazy voices and acting and things, and my players are also just amazing. So we bring a different component. So you could just sit and watch Netflix and it could be entertaining, or you can sit and watch a very well improv high production value D&D or tabletop stream and actually have something invested in that. Like, you can't go watch ER and talk to Clooney while he's in the middle of his thing, right? But you can talk to me, or you can talk to the players, or you can donate potions. Like, one of our big things for our Patreon or like Twitch menu is you can donate bits for potions, or if you're a subscriber, you can give players inspiration. Like, that is huge. Like, I mean, I know I have a few of my big longtime fans who love giving all of our players all these things, but then they're part of the story, which is why our tagline is building community through gaming chaos, to friendship, gaming, and chaos, is because like we're friends with all of our community, and our community feels like they're part of the story. Yes, in the grand scheme of things, like an inspiration die is an inspiration die, but when that boss rolls a natural 20 and someone's like, I have an inspiration die, and they like throw it at the screen because they want me to re-roll, that person who donated that inspiration die just helped someone not get a natural 20. And I do max damage, and then you roll again. So my critical hits are much more critical than a normal one.
Ooh, ow.
Ow.
Ouch. Ow.
Yes. It goes
I
both
felt
ways,
that.
though. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
I do roll a lot of natural 20s, though, so that everyone thinks my metal dice are loaded. There we are.
And for those of you watching, I want to point out, too, that I've played in one of Chris's games online. And first of all, it was a riot, a whole lot of fun. But in addition, if you're listening, you're thinking, I want to help these people. I don't know these guys. It turns out you don't have to just help us. You can also donate to drop monsters on people. through Chris's stream. So
Yes.
let's all be clear that you can be an agent of chaos as well as a boon to the right.
Absolutely. I mean, and when you think about that, you can start pulling stuff from the top shelf up there. You're like, hey, let's bring that monster in, right? But it's going back to like the responsibility. Like, we're in this pandemic. People are wanting to be entertained. They're wanting to feel part of something. They're wanting that community. And we're starting to branch out. We have a lot of new programming. We have a lot of interactive and engaging programming. One of our most popular shows is called "The Choice Is Yours," which is my tagline. Whenever someone kills something, I say "The choice is yours," so you can decide how that creature dies. So we have an actual campaign which started with conventions. Was people were talking about like, oh, all this is not improv, it's scripted. You already have the set built. You know what's going on. I showed you guys the picture because everyone knows where we're going tonight, so that's kind of a thing. Like, I can really prep for things that are super big. But so for the Choice Is Your campaign, I cleared my table. I took my camera off and showed the table. There's nothing here. We created the characters live on stream. We asked the audience, okay, what are 4 encounters they could hit outdoors? And I rolled a virtual D4, and we picked live what the players were going to go through. And everybody loved it because everybody was part of it. They were telling the stories. They were helping with the characters. They were helping with the bosses, and they were helping decide and navigate. And then while the characters are taking, or while the players are taking feedback from the chat, I turn my video off and I'm scrambling over here trying to build some set. Like it was like a floating city. Sure, let's build a floating city. Like, the things that they would come up with were phenomenal. But I have, like, everything, I'm so modular now. I have dungeon tiles, I have terrain pieces and trees and rocks and cave pieces. I can legitimately make anything. But that engagement is what I think us as content creators, that's my really long answer to your probably very simple question. But,
No,
again, I also love
That is good.
No, it's good. I love the conversation. This is fantastic. Keep it going.
Ewok Village.
Well,
That was something
you should
else.
stop now, but
Yeah, someone wanted an Ewok
No, I'm
Village.
kidding.
That was something that they picked, and that's something that won was an Ewok. I built an Ewok Village, and it was amazing though. It was great.
Was it great?
Yeah, well, they killed all the Ewoks, but yeah, it was great.
Okay, well, I think that's secretly what everybody wanted to have happen anyway. So I'm pretty sure, right? I'm sorry, Daniel. Did you start to say something?
Yeah, I think what Chris talks about is what's really intriguing about younger gamers in particular, and this is kind of a truism across the board. And this kind of goes back to the rise of online streaming games. Most young gamers now, their first touch with D&D is through the lens of Critical Role. It's through the lens of actual play on Twitch. It's through the lens of watching Fabled 42 and other shows. So that, I come from I'm 43, so I age myself here for a moment. But the other gamers who are in my group say, yeah, we watch these shows, we listen to podcasts, this is our doorway in. And I think that audiences who are not there and able to participate or able to get together and game at their local gaming shop or get together in the proverbial basement to game with their friends, they have that opportunity to still be involved.
Yeah.
With games and to interact in intriguing ways. I think one of the things that Chris mentioned is you can buy potions with bits, which is great. You have that. You can interact with the players, interact with the game master, interact with the audience, interact also with the audience. Conversely, so it's really interesting to see the way that gamers have changed. And in fact, I would say that younger gamers are far more prepared for what's happened with COVID than perhaps older gamers, because their gaming began online. It began online rather.
Yeah.
And they're watching shows, they're watching actual play, they're doing a lot of their gaming, the Hollywood Square style, like we're talking right now. They're doing most of their gaming that way anyhow. What I think is really intriguing about what Fable 42 is doing is the ability to have that terrain piece as a part of the interaction, because most people use digital assets, but having physical assets to be able to represent on screen is something unique and new, and it's certainly an interesting way to play, even though your players may be remote. I think it's really interesting what you're doing, Chris. I haven't seen other actual play shows that weren't in person that are using terrain too, so it's really cool to hear that you're able to adapt very quickly, especially when you get questions around, is it scripted? And you're able to really quickly kind of nimbly create something. I kind of thought from what you're like, and I have this Ewok village when I was a kid, and like put it up there to play on. Like the fact that you had the terrain to build it is incredible. I know we're all lamenting getting rid of it as a kid. I'm like, I wish I had that Davy Lock Village, but that's really cool now. But I think more so than anything else, it speaks to the expectation gamers have of publishers, of content creators. They want that high touch relationship. They want it not only just with people who are playing games online, but they also want it with publishers. And you're probably seeing in the industry that publishers are kind of like, because typically they're arm's length from their fans, but Dungeons and Dragons, Jeremy Crawford, all those people have a very high touch relationships. Their designers are on Twitter interacting with fans, answering questions, because that's the expectation of younger gamers. And I think it's really interesting to see, despite the fact we're kind of living in plague times, the way different demographies have kind of adapted to changes.
Oh, very cool. And I want to add to the idea that you just mentioned, the whole like having actual terrain, physical 3-dimensional terrain. For those of you who aren't familiar with, I know that pretty much everyone who's listening here probably has at least some familiarity with Fabled 42. But if you haven't ever seen one of their streams, you should go watch them. They're very cool.
Yeah.
But in addition, as a player who'd never had the opportunity to do that, virtually having, like Daniel said, the real 3D terrain, when I was playing in the game with Chris's group, there was something extra special, cool, awesome to be able to, point at the screen. I mean, not that you could see where I was pointing because that's not helpful, but, point at the screen and say, no, the red tree, the red, put me behind the red tree, and then watch as my miniature goes and hides behind that specific red, tree. And then you get to see the entire battlefield laid out in a 3-dimensional way. And it was just, there was something better about that than having a flat token that you were, going, I guess I'm sort of behind the tree, whatevs, right?
And that's where Vorpal board really comes in clutch, because I think in our first game we weren't on Vorpal yet. I think we were getting there, because like everyone does it. Like when you're playing remote, you're like, I want to go right there, and we're like, we can't see where you're pointing. You're like, oh yeah, but as you all can see, like with Vorpal board, I'll turn it on. You can see my red cursor. Right? You can see my red cursor floating around, so then the players can point on the battle map exactly where they want to go. I see it, I move it. And same thing, there's also a zoom feature. So like I can get the camera close, and then you can, as a player, you can click that zoom feature and you can zoom in on all the details, and it's really cool, and it feels like you're there, and you feel like, you're actually getting where you are, and you can kind of see vantage points. I do a lot of stuff with elevations too, because like you can't really do that on a virtual thing, because you can, but you can, it doesn't look the same. But like seeing, I don't want to show it, you'll see it tonight if you guys watch tonight, but I have multiple elevations because they're fighting my version of Tiamat, which is way worse than Tiamat. They did 2,700 points of damage last game, and she's about half dead, and she's way worse.
She's winded.
She's winded. Well, I give them really awesome weapons, so that's kind of like the balance thing. But yeah, she's super winded. But yeah, I like that. I like the elevations, and I like, having that real, tangible thing you can touch. I have, whoa, I dropped it. I have, the player's token. Like, they've made these guys on Hero Forge. So like they made these, they had them painted. They have color indicators that match the, the color that you guys have underneath your name. So there's so many things that just really make you feel like you're there. And that's been the biggest challenge from transitioning from tabletop to virtual, is like that home table feel. It's hard to do. It's a lot easier to do when you have a real table, though. It makes you, that chemistry, like, different. But
you're talking exactly about, Phil and I were talking about this before the show. Like our gaming group, we play in person with figures, with terrain, put everything on this massive turntable in the middle of the table. We can spin it so we can see the correct angle and know where we want to go. But our transition to playing online through Zoom has been challenging because we're accustomed to the physicality of figures, of terrain, and it sounds like the way that you're working with the Vorpal boards. Or I need to talk to you and pick your brain after this. Like, and I gotta do this for my own game.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that we're starting to explore, because like I only have the bandwidth to really know one game system. Like I might be able to be a player for something else, but we're bringing in other people to run other games. I've run other tabletop games when they're doing their Kickstarters to help promote their stuff, so they can see live, the gameplay and all that. But there's a lot of features that Vorpal has that I don't even utilize, with like actual virtual tokens and a compass with digital tables and like all the different things. There's so many things that we can do.
I will say that's the first piece of online software used for gaming that absolutely will get you a table feel or as close to it as we're going to be able to.
Yeah.
And it's the first piece of those things that actually got my interest, and I'm a Luddite, so.
You're not wrong. No, so Daniel, I know. Thank you so much for all the stuff that you shared, but I have a question I'd like to direct to you that's specifically for you. So I know that you launched Zweihander a bit ago, but I think that I felt, to me at least, like you were really picking up steam about the time that COVID hit in terms of spread popularity, the things you were working on. And a lot of companies I've seen that I know of a couple of others, I'm not going to name them because I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad, but there are a couple of others who had been working with Tabletop and some other stores, and they've really suffered from this because something that they didn't do that you have done. So that's what I want to ask you about, is how is it that Zweihander has not only survived but thrived in the wake of all this? What do you think is different? Like just a couple of points you think are different about what you guys did that made it work.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple factors kind of there. I mean, beyond just, I want to set aside like the publisher relationships. Foremost, we have distribution through Simon and Schuster, which the RPG publishing does not. It's a simple fact. We are a publisher. Andrews McNeil has been around for 50 years. It was not an RPG publisher first. So this is typically where a lot of RPG companies struggle, which is, how do I get my book in Barnes & Noble? Like, you can find Zweihander right now sitting right beside Dungeons & Dragons in Barnes & Noble, anywhere. You can find it in Waterstones in the UK. That's probably one of the powers, so to speak, that Andrews McNeil brings to the table. But from the actual game Zweihander itself, I come from 16 years of digital marketing. I cut my teeth in the marketing realm. I ran campaigns for Gatorade, for United Rentals, for large, big brands. That was my background. And when I left my 16-year career in advertising to make RPGs for a living, which was weird, but I brought those skills forward, and we've weaponized those at Andrews McNeil Universal. We have a very solid digital marketing strategy. You don't find it with a lot of other publishers, because a lot of publishers are still kind of in the traditional, like, face-to-face relationship arena. We wanted to say we need to bifurcate our strategy to say we need to be online and present. Not only that, as the creator of Zweihander, I have a super high-touch relationship with the community. I think that's incredibly important. It's important. When I first launched the Kickstarter 4 years ago, which, by the way, was my anniversary is yesterday. 4 years ago, I was a little misty-eyed over it. But coming from a Kickstarter to where I'm at now, I've carried all those lessons forward, and we continue to grow and evolve. I think any publisher who says they have it figured out is wrong. You're going to stumble, you're going to mess up, and you should learn from your mistakes. I certainly did as an individual creator, but now bringing this digital strategy forward, having a high-touch relationship with the community, as well as hiring and bringing in marginalized voices, BIPOC, POC, people of different gender and sexualities to work on the games that we're working on. I think it's allowed us to survive in a way that other publishers haven't, because we have the advantage of being fresh, I guess, to some degree. But also we're present in the channels that our audience is at. I think it's really the key insight, which is, if your audience is at game stores, be in game stores. If your audience is younger, is coming in through the lens of actual play, be in that space. We do sponsored influencer play to raise awareness around our games. We work with groups similar to Fabled 42 who run our games, and they're running for seasons. We also have a Twitch partner channel that we run games through, and we have 4 shows to 6 shows a week. So we're trying to be present in the spaces where people are at contextually. And I think that's given us a unique advantage, if only because we're young and scrappy, I guess, to some degree. But also, I think it really speaks to the power that Andrews McNeil brings forward, which is, 5 decades of publishing experience that a lot of other publishers just simply don't have yet. Hopefully they do at some point. But we were a publisher before we were an RPG company. And that, I think, is really the competitive edge that Andrews McNeil brings, and why we've been able to not only kind of foresee some of this, what was going to happen, but also to cope and continue growing.
Very good. So there are a couple of other questions I want to get through before the end of our session at 7:30. So for all of you, what has been your biggest surprise to come out of the whole social isolation coronavirus event? What is it that you have been most surprised by from your communities?
I'll I'll leave with that one. The biggest thing that we have seen from this is so many people that have been out of these kind of hobbies coming back to them. And because a lot of times they're in, especially in family situations, this is where we are seeing parents that are in Daniel's age category and with kids at home that are now suddenly starting to explore subjects that they have not touched since they were children. And watching the explosion of those kind of things, but especially family activities around tables again, because Netflix and any watching videos and stuff only lasts so long. That was a great treat. Now, when it's the only thing you've got for entertainment, people are looking for other options on this. So seeing people reconnect at their home level, especially among small families, has been unbelievably good. And I think that's going to be a really good piece that comes out of this. I think we're going to see a lot more kids reading on the other side of this, quite frankly.
Yeah. I'm only sort of joking when I say this. So I see some gaming opportunity for, as we're looking at school this fall, because seriously, how many of us have not, as adults, even struggle with calculating like paladin bonuses by the time that you figure, or like archer bonuses, right? Or a paladin archer bonus for point blank shot plus your smite and everything else. So I mean, I think this maybe is also a great opportunity for people to look at some educational value
Absolutely.
of games.
Yeah.
So Daniel, Chris, did you have any big surprises you wanted to share?
Go ahead, Chris.
I mean, the biggest surprise is I'm more busy now than I was before, which is surprising in itself.
I hear you. Yeah.
I mean, we had a lot of changes in the network, and we're becoming much more of a network. We started with Ukador, and then we switched to Fable 42. We kind of like, all right, here we go. This is what we're gonna do, and then it hit, and we're like, all right. So we had like slightly sidestepped and reevaluated and did some things and took some things off and put some things out, but again, I mean, I've touched on this before. Like, the biggest surprise is like how amazing our community is, and how like they're there for us because they know that we're struggling, but then we're still have to put on a show. Like people are struggling with bills or finances or just whatever's going on in their lives, and everyone has all this weight. And we as players and DMs use our shows as therapy, and our fans use this show for therapy. So it's just like a big group hug that we do several times a week that we wish we could do all the time, but we're not quite there yet.
Oh, that's nice.
I think from the publisher's side, I think we're seeing a new vested interest in IP. It was really interesting because in a lot of ways, big shows like The Witcher is an example. Like, these things are existing in multiple mediums. There's a film that was supposed to come out recently called The Green Knight. They released a tabletop game, like a box set. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's a A24 film, and they're like, for a marketing piece, we're going to do that. In fact, less than a year ago, Wendy's released a tabletop RPG, which was released. I know the designer, I know the writer. I worked at the company who created it, and I have a print copy. But I think what we're seeing is that a lot of well-known film IP is trying to transition into tabletop, especially in the wake of COVID. They're looking for ways they can continue extending their brand, their marketing dollars. It's very clear, and you can look at the numbers. The tabletop RPGs continue to grow. In fact, if you look at recent numbers for growth among the industry, it is not tailed at all. Now, the projected numbers are off, but it's still going up. So, and I know Phil probably can speak to this about from the FLGS level, but even across just the industry in general, revenues are not tailing. People are gaming. People are getting together, enjoying time with their families, teaching their children, using RPGs as tools, using RPGs as a form of therapy. I think we're seeing games in the same sense we saw kind of the resurgence of board games on Kickstarter in 2010. I think tabletop games are growing at an exponential rate. In companies, in particular, traditional publishers like Andrews McNeil is looking at ways they can tap into that market, because they know that the analog form of games that we play, right, the books that we have around our tables, whether it be virtual or in person, despite the fact that we have a move toward digital gaming, people still love physical artifacts. They still want books. And that's just even our younger gamers we see with Zweihander. They'll pick up the PDF and they'll buy the physical book and they'll buy the version on Roll20 because they want to have that contextual relationship
Right.
with the game, with the creators, and with RPGs being in a form of kind of cottage industry, like gamers they love the things that they play, they love the things that they do, and they want in multiple formats. So I think really it's been surprising to see that the industry in general, sales haven't suffered, at least from Andrews McNeil's perspective.
No, I think
It's just
yeah, I think from the industry in general, the latest material that we've seen across the board, everything has done well. But again, these are all hobbies we've always enjoyed, sitting at home around a dining room table, or now in front of a screen with our friends too. But that person-to-person engagement is what everybody needs. If we can't do it face-to-face, doing it through digital means to be able to carry on, I think it's going to get us through it.
Very nice. Okay, so we got a few minutes left. I want to be sure that we get this in. So let's start with you, Daniel. So if people want to see the things that you have to offer between Zweihander and AM Universal, what is it that where can people go find you? And you want to give us a quick rundown of a couple of projects you're working on?
Yeah, so the best place to go is Zweihander.game. Got lucky on buying that domain. Zweihander.game is the best place to start. Obviously, Zweihander is our main game line, but it's not the only game line we have. We have about 14 books currently in the Zweihander game line, from cards and Game Master screens and player's handbooks and things like that. Something that's coming out recently, or here pretty soon in October, which is not Zweihander, is Andrew Kolb's Neverland, this beautiful, amazing new D&D 5th edition setting that he illustrated and wrote himself when we produced. Coming in 2021, which is sooner than later, we have a new game coming out that I don't think we've made a formal announcement about yet, but we're calling it Project 1776. It's a supernatural horror game that takes place during the American Revolutionary War, which we have a really diverse group of creators from indigenous nations as well as Black creators who are helping us create design, because it is a very challenging time. And then we have a new dark fantasy IP that's going to be released around the same time that I can't talk about yet, but looking forward beyond that. James Introcaso, one of the lead designers of D&D, we signed a deal with him not more than 2 months ago, and he's writing a huge campaign story for Zweihander. We're super excited about that. But you can learn all about this at Zweihander.game, or just follow me on Twitter, as the kids say, at Zweihander RPG.
Nice. Okay, and Phil, how do people find Tabletop and all of Tabletop's various online and in person here in Kansas City?
Well, our single and sprawling physical location is in Overland Park, Kansas. If you ever make it to the middle of the country, Stample Our Barbecue and our game stores. So you can find us there. We also have an online store, tabletopgameandhobby.com, or find us on Facebook or any of our other feeds, again, at Tabletop Game and Hobby. But we've got big plans post-COVID, and in fact, we will be making major announcements in the next week or so. Some very important things got signed this week. That's what we'll say. So.
Oh, that's exciting! Yay!
Yes.
I didn't know they got signed. That's yay!
Yes.
And Chris, I want to hear you talk about. I know, again, I suspect we already have members of your audience here, but I would very much like to have you speak for just a moment to the places people can find your content.
Well, you can find my content here. But you can go to fable42.com. It has all of our stuff in it. I dropped a Zweihander link. I don't know if that was the right one. I was trying to find the other one in the chat. I dropped the Tabletop Game and Hobby link in there as well. Yeah, that's where you can find all of our stuff. We kind of market ourselves as a Geek and Sundry, but for the community. So we're built by the community. We have hundreds of content creators and digital designers and DMs and just artists, and there's so much, and we're all building this together and as we're going, and we're trying to so very excited to have this conversation. We've touched on a lot of really cool things. Definitely interested in the publishing thing, because I've been talking about making Ukador a playable campaign setting, which I'm not ready for yet, but I want, but I know the community is, so I built a huge map because we're partnered with Incarnate RPG, or Incarnate map making, or what have you. So I have an 8K map, which is just monstrous, and it's beautiful, and you can zoom all the way to the cities, and so there's so much stuff that we want to do as a community with my world and all the other worlds, because there are 4 worlds that we have in the Fabled 42 network. So there are 4 other homebrews, and we have Adventures in Middle Earth, which was a Cubicle 7, and somebody else owns it now. But it's we're trying to do more of that. So having this, which was a coined phrase from one of our community members, the solo verse, which I like it, so I'm gonna say okay. But it is this multiverse where we've connected all the community, all the groups. So like Ukador is connected to Forgotten Realms, and Cantor, and Shaul Gould, and all these other things, and even Middle Earth in a sense. So like we're having all these different like bridges to each of the realms to kind of tie everything in, where you can have crossover. Which is kind of fun. Like they just killed my version of Osirok, because these actually connected with Forgotten Realms, and like so, like there's all these different tie-ins with history and timelines and everything else. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Okay, I don't have anything else I want to cover. I know that we are sitting at 7:30, so it's probably about time, sadly enough, for us to go. If you are interested, however, in seeing more from Tabletop Game and Hobby and from Fabled 42, we have a Shadowrun game on Friday. Please check the schedule. Yeah. And in addition, we have another panel, our GM Zone of Truth, which is a GMing Q&A session with all of the regular Tabletop GMs, is going to be on Saturday.
Awesome.
So please, by all means, come back and watch us there as well.
Yeah.
Cool. And I'm going to turn it back over to you when you're ready to.
Yeah, so I mean, this is Gen Con weekend. We're doing what we normally do. We're going to stream 12 hours a day starting tomorrow until Monday. So like tonight's show for the Realms of Ukador, which is part 2 of our finale, it was just kind of our pre-Gen Con game. And we're going to do a one-shot tomorrow, then a panel, and then another one-shot. So we're doing that every day this week. We have a lot of really cool content. A lot of it's not D&D, and I'm not in half of it, which is fantastic, because usually I'm in everything.
Nice.
But, you know, we have... I just have the schedule right here. We have... I lost it. We have Deadlands we're playing in. We're also doing Morkborg, I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's also a thing. And then we have a couple other games in there too. So very exciting, very exciting. I'm super stoked for Gen Con. Thank you all for having this panel. I'm glad I was a part of it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Chris, for helping us out through all of this and for being a fantastic host as always.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
But yeah, so thank you all. Go ahead, get some dinner and come back in an hour, because I'm going to try to TPK the party. We'll see what happens.
Sweet.
That's
I don't know who would be more angry or happy. You know, we joke about it, but like, has any like narrative-driven show that everyone has followed for 2 years ever TPK'd at the end? Like, would the players like come drive up to Ashland, Oregon, and murder me? Would my fans think it was awesome? Like, how would you end that? Like, that's just, I don't know. There's some of them in the chat right now. I'm just teasing them. So, but yeah, so we'll be back. We'll be back with the Realms of Ukador in about 55 minutes. So thank you all for participating in the chat, and thank you guys for being here. So we'll see you guys next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Thanks, kids.